Hey, my name is Stephanie Lewis. I'm 64, and for the first 61 years of my life, I truly disliked myself. Like, I hated myself. And I know that's an attention grabber, isn't it? I don't really understand why, though. I mean, I'm talking about it, so I came out to the other side. So at 61, I found out that I'm ADHD. I spent 61 years collecting evidence against myself. 61 years of being told I couldn't trust my own perceptions, and in order to be happy, I needed to fit in and have friends, especially the right kind of friends. But what was really important is that I learned quickly that I couldn't trust anyone, especially not myself. After every interaction, it seemed like I would just think and think and think and think and think and think and think about every single effing thing that was said. It would drive me mad because no matter what, I could never figure out what I did wrong. Then I found out. Now, bear in mind, I have worked in this field for over 40 years. I'm a behavior disorders teacher. That means my classroom was filled with kids on the spectrum, mostly who were misdiagnosed prior to neurodivergence being put on the spectrum 20 years ago. I'm a school psychologist. I literally gave the tests and diagnosed people. I'm a transformational coach. I'm a hypnotherapist, meditation teacher, NLP practitioner, manifestation teacher, and I'm a habits coach. I even received additional training at Emory University Medical Center in neuropsychology and behaviorism. And I'm telling you all this not to brag, except that, according to me, I had never had a successful moment in my life, mostly because I overthink myself out of every success I had. And then I found out I'm a member of this wonderful, awesome community of creative humans, and I'm talking about you. And that is when my world changed. It's because I very quickly realized that there was no therapy out there, no courses that were designed specifically to work with our brain and specifically for our needs, meaning to benefit us. I'll go out on a limb and say that most interventions for us benefit the world around us with very little benefit specifically for us. So I created this program, and it's called Growing Neurons. And it's designed specifically to work with our brain. And there's no language involved. You don't have to speak. Cool, huh? I've even had amazing results with myself. And then I started working with clients, and I've gotten great feedback as well as great testimonials. And people have seen some great results. But then I wrote a book. Well, to be honest, I've written about 20 books. This, however, is the only book I've ever had the confidence and the faith in myself to actually publish. It's not yet published, though. It'll be published next week. And it is with someone now who is uploading it to Amazon to be published. And it's free on Kindle Unlimited for as long as I can keep it free on Kindle Unlimited. There's a soft cover, of course, and that'll be a charge. But if you want the free PDF, for as long as I can keep it free, I'm keeping it free. I'm very proud of this book. So, the name of the book is Growing the Confidence Neuron, or actually the Confidence Neuron. Here's the mechanism, and it's the whole point of the book. So, first of all, we're taught that because we're different, like we're quirky, we're odd, or like my cousin Sharon said when I was 17 and I was going off to college, it's like you're from a different planet. And I can't tell you how useful that feedback was. Thanks, cuz. That's great. I know about your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren now, and you know this is genetic. But anyway, we get feedback like that. We're also told that because we're different and weird and odd that we really can't trust our own decisions. Then we think or we figure out that the more we cater to people, the more we put other people's needs before our own. Well, then maybe we'll fit in, maybe we'll have success, and maybe people will like us. Except every time we do that, we lose our ability to trust ourselves. And here's the thing. There's no research at all that shows that teaching people to do this actually works for anything other than causing anxiety and depression for all of us. Self-efficacy research started by Albert Bandura in the 1960s shows what I am presenting today, what my program is, and what the book is about. When you learn to trust yourself, you develop confidence. When you trust yourself and you're confident, you can be okay in situations that used to cause sometimes extreme emotional and mental pain. And it is amazing having faith in your own read on things. Here's what changes because of that. Because you're out in the world and someone does something that would normally trigger rejection-sensitive dysphoria, like a tone, a look, a comment, an out-and-out dig, it doesn't land the same way anymore. Why? Because you trust yourself. Because you already have confidence in your own read on the situation. So someone else's reaction doesn't get to override it. Self-trust comes first. Confidence comes next. Then immunity to the spiral. When you learn to trust yourself, you develop confidence. When you trust yourself and you're confident, you can be okay. You have faith in your own read on things. And here's what changes because of that. When you're out in the world and someone does something that would normally trigger RSD, it doesn't happen anymore because you are okay. Psychology uses a lot of different names for this, like self-efficacy, perceived control, self-concept clarity, interoceptive awareness, authenticity, self-advocacy, different decades, different populations, but they all converge on the same finding. Statistically, people do better mentally, physically, and functionally when they experience themselves as capable of acting, able to make sense of their own internal states, coherent across time, and credible to themselves. That convergence is what I mean by self-trust. Not one single measurement, an umbrella over all the different pieces of research. And this is the part that matters most for a room full of people like me who think differently. This isn't primarily about social skill. You can learn every script, every bit of timing, every polite phrase, and still have poor outcomes if you chronically distrust your own mind, if you override your own body, if your worth is tied to whether someone approved of you today. Meanwhile, someone with rougher social fluency but strong self-trust often has a better foundation for resilience, for health, for recovery, for showing up as themselves. The research doesn't call this package confidence the way we use the word at parties, but it's the same thing. Accurate self-belief plus usable self-trust. Let's start with the body because that's where the book starts too. Interoception is the term your ability to notice and interpret internal signals. Heart rate, tension, hunger, the flood before meltdown. The research shows that when people improve their interoceptive awareness, their emotional regulation improves with it. Body trust and self-regulation move together. When body trust is low, depressive symptoms tend to go up. Now let's talk about rejection because I promised you I'd explain why it stops landing. So there's a body of neuroscience, a big one, showing that social pain and physical pain share overlapping systems in the brain. Getting excluded doesn't just feel bad the way disappointment feels bad. It registers somewhere closer to an injury, a physical injury. A meta-analysis pulling together 75 separate studies found substantial associations between rejection-sensitive and a whole range of mental health outcomes. So when I say RSD is real neurology, it really is. RSD starts with an overexcitation of the limbic system and the reticular activating system, while at the same time the prefrontal cortex is depressed. The way I put it is all the zoo animals are out of the cages running amok, and the zookeeper all went home, and they closed their doors and they barred their windows. After that, the brain creates an RSD death spiral habit circuit in the brain, and every time you go through it, every time you ruminate, you strengthen and build neurons and the habit chain until you now have one more habit of continually and compulsively thinking in the worst possible way about a situation where you felt rejected, whether or not you actually were. And that is the behavioral social habit portion. Now, the neuroanatomical part, that excitation and crash, that can actually be managed pretty easily in the moment so that you're not having to literally chew the inside of your cheeks to keep yourself from exploding and freaking out. The habit part, though, is fixed by building a new habit. So let's talk about how self-trust changes that equation. So, if my worth is contingent on approval, if I need the room to like me in order to feel okay about myself, then every unambiguous look is a threat to my entire identity. But contingent self-worth has its own research trail, and it's not flattering. When self-worth is tied to approval or performance, people become more vulnerable to stress, to depression, to burnout, to identity that swings wildly based on how the last 5 minutes went. literally. Self-love in the research sense isn't a slogan on a mug. It's non-contingent self-worth. Worth that does not renegotiate itself every time someone's face does something ambiguous. That's what self-trust buys you. Not immunity from other people being unpleasant, because they're going to be. It's immunity from letting their unpleasantness rewrite your worth. Then there's masking, which is its own research trail. I love this one. I'm saying this about masking because I need everyone to understand. First of all, I'm in no way saying don't mask. Everyone has to mask. If you have the ability to put on the mask, everybody does. Neurotypical people have to mask. If you don't believe that, think about that customer service representative who you cursed out and who just said, yeah, you're right. You're the customer. That's called a mask and it's their job. Everybody wears a mask sometime. The difference is when neurotypical people take their mask off, they don't spend the next weeks ruminating and going through and tearing themselves apart or wanting to murder the other person. They have the confidence not to do that. That you can have from growing neurons and creating a different habit everywhere. It's called selective authenticity. Do you love that? Knowing where it's safe to be exactly who you are and where the performance is necessary. That call requires self-trust to make it correctly because you have to trust your own read on which rooms are safe to go into. Habits now get the same correction, and I'm saving that for now. The research on habit formation is clear that confidence is your ability to perform a particular habit. Habit-specific self-efficacy helps that behavior become automatic, which means the belief comes first, then the behavior follows, not the other way around. That's why the book runs on small, repeatable entries instead of dramatic annual resolutions. Small is what the research says actually automates. That's what the Stoics said, and yeah, that's what James Clear said too. So now we're coming to the conclusion, and I want you to think about this. Is self-trust and self-confidence that you borrowed from someone, anyone, actually yours? Would you please remember, self-trust, true self-trust does not need a witness. It survives in any empty room because you're there. It was built for the person standing there after everyone leaves, and that's you. That's what the book is about. 12 sections, 365 entries of 150 words each, and every single one of them is doing the same job, handing you back one piece of evidence that you can trust yourself so that confidence has something real to stand on. And so that the next time someone's tone or look or comment tries to tell you who you are, you already know because you trust yourself, because you already decided, because you already started believing your own evidence instead of waiting for someone else to do it. You guys, it's been great talking to you for however long this one turned out to be. If you'd like to find out more about the book or my program, Growing Neurons, please reach out to the information right here on the screen. Anyone who reaches out to me or anyone who would like anyway, I do have a video that shows you how to do at least one way to, in a moment, get out of immediacy of an RSD situation. All you need is a bathroom stall or someplace to go sit that's quiet, and usually toilets are good for that. Go sit on that toilet for 1 or 2 minutes and do that activity in the video. Also, I'm giving my social media. I am starting a brand new group. The group right now only has a few hundred members in it, but it is only a couple of weeks old. I would love it if you came and joined and learn how to be happy with us, because that's the point of the group. It's being happy. Being happy, not being ourselves. Being happy until we can be ourselves again. You get that, right? Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Trauma with my mother, my father, all the abuse I went through. And, just like I told you before, that I didn't find out till years later that I have autism and ADHD. Trauma alone can cause a lot of problems for your relationships, just that alone. And then you throw autism on top of that. And so for a long time, I was getting like, why am I like my mom? Why do I get exacerbated? Why do I get angry? Why do I have triggers? What is wrong with me? Well, autistic people struggle with their emotional regulation. I really started noticing a lot of things about my behavior when my son started doing ABA. And I realized that my behavior had to change as well. And so did my husband, so did our whole family. That when we were asking Malachi to change his behavior, we were also asking the family to support him in that. So my point being is that I want to make sure that spouses know that it's okay, and give yourself grace when you get exacerbated, when you have a meltdown, when you're frustrated. If you have a good spouse and an understanding spouse, yeah, they may get frustrated at times. They may react in the wrong way at times, but they're going to come together with you and understand your need. And it wasn't until I spoke about my autism and my ADHD and realized my trauma and my insecurities, I really took responsibility for that before I was able to realize how negative and how frustrated I was getting my husband. And then on top of that, because my husband is such a forgiving guy, I'm like, if I say I'm sorry, he's like a golden retriever. It's okay, honey, it's fine. And I'm like so mad, hanging on to shit that I shouldn't be hanging on to, and getting mad and getting mad at stuff. And this is all my trauma. But somebody that struggles with that, it's okay, give themselves grace. But also at the same time, my husband had some real issues that I was seeing similar to my son, that I used to get so mad at him over and didn't understand. Like, what the heck? How come you don't get up and do the dishes? Why don't you notice these things being dirty? How come you don't notice things on our son? Now, men, as it is, have a hard time with, they will never do shit like a mama will. Never will. I had to realize that. My husband won't do things as a mama does, so I had to accept him for how he could do it. And that was hard for me. And I had to recognize that was hard for me, because not only does my autism come into play, but my trauma comes into play. I don't want things dirty. I don't want my kids to be like this. And then I had to understand that he's not going to notice things, and he even has more of a deficit. Because little things Malachi doesn't notice. He's struggling. He's 9, and he's struggling to notice when he pees. He's struggling to notice when he has to use the bathroom. He's struggling to remember. He has to repetitively get things in routine on repeat over and over and over and over again until things click for him. You can't just get mad at him and say, well, why aren't you putting that dish away? Why do you keep leaving your toys around? Like, you can't do that, because you have to teach him every step of that routine. And when that routine is disrupted, he gets frustrated. My husband, my 46-year-old grown ass husband, is the same way. Why aren't you doing the house chores? Why aren't you doing this? How come you don't notice it? Why are you being lazy? And sometimes he does get very lazy, but I realize that I'm not meeting him where he's at. And on top of it, I have OCDs to where I'm like, I don't like the way you did that. And so here my autism is coming to play. It's hard having an autistic family. So I guess what I noticed is that each of us as partners and as a family have to give each other grace, because we are doing the very best that we can with what we have and the challenges we have. And what's funny about it is that God put us together like that. I'm like, God, throw me a bone here, because I don't understand your child right now. Talking about my husband, right? And so I had to let God fix him. And I could express my concerns, but I had to let God fix him. The point being is I have to make my husband a list. I have to make him a list. He will not just remember to get up and do the dishes even when it's his turn. He has to repetitively do it on his days off for him. And it's hard for him to switch from work mode to home mode. So these are little things that we've known each other since we were 5, off and on, like really connected. God put us together. There was a reason for that. And we dated when we were 16, and we just kept coming back together. God kept throwing us back together. But even after all this time, I've known this man forever. Like, we still had to grow. We still had to figure this out. And I still had to give him grace and realize that, do I like his behaviors? I don't like when he rolls his eyes. He doesn't use his words. I'm the one that yells, but he can say F you in a look in his face, and still it's still as piercing as when I actually say it. My point being in telling you this is that sometimes with autistic couples, you have to figure out where those triggers are, and you have to give grace, and you have to figure out, what can I do to make things easier for my spouse today? What can I do to make things easier and give myself that self-love? What can I do to be able to regulate my emotions so I'm not so disrupted by this? It's hard enough out in the world getting disrupted by other people and other things. I don't want that coming in my home. So I guess what I'm saying is that even adults have very real issues in autistic families that people that are not autistic have no idea how hard it is just for us to cope in a family, just for us to be able to talk every day. When finances arise, when things arise, it is so much harder for us to cope with things than it is for somebody who's not autistic. And we have to give ourselves grace. And then we have to figure out what are those communications going to look like between each other and our family? And how are we teaching our children? And what are we going to do to regulate our emotions? And what are we going to do to recognize our spouse's deficits and accommodate them where they are and be able to show that grace while still being able to not feel bad about setting expectations and saying, hey, this is a real problem for me. This gives me a trigger, owning those emotions and still loving them through it, still choosing every day to love them regardless of their weaknesses. So anyway, it's a lot to uncover, but I'm so grateful to God every day that He allows people in my life. I'm like about to cry because I know the weaknesses that I have. I know the frustrations that I get, the fears that I get, the things that people do that bother the heck out of me. I know the frustrations I even get with my own spouse. And yet God still covers us. He still allows us to be here with people we love. And He forgives us. So I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to have what I have. I'm grateful to have the blessings that I have. I just want to be able to regulate and give grace where I need to. And I want autistic people to know that they deserve to have what they have, that it was purposeful, that what God did, and that they're doing the best they can with what they have. And they've got to give themselves grace and give the people they love grace and figure out what that looks like to be able to communicate within their homes.
Hello, my name is Trang, and here's my story how I'm built on difference. Growing up, I was often labeled as the easygoing, more reserved child. However, over time, it did become more prevalent that I was nonverbal, to the point that I had to utilize mood boards, sign language, and pointing at objects to be able to communicate. With intensive therapies and diagnosis with autism spectrum disorder, better known as ASD, I was able to defy this hurdle and to be able to set my own goals for what I wanted in life. With that in mind, I was able to read, write, and do interpersonal things like dress myself and utilize the restroom and take care of myself interpersonally. With that in mind, I was able to overcome that hurdle in my life. However, with academia, it was another story. While I did flourish in school and the way that they were graded with a vigorous system, my academics were very high, to the point I was always making honor roll or be able to really get a good 3.5 or above GPA. However, interpersonally, it was a different story. Growing up, I was labeled as the weird kid, the one that no one wanted to interact with, and to a point, though, that it caused complete isolation growing up, to the point that people would interact with me only for a gimmick. While this was distressing at the time, over time I did utilize this to the best of my ability and change my mindset to defy the odds. I excelled in academics, participated in numerous clubs despite who was in it, and also was able to find my interest of what I wanted to do. With that in mind, I'm proud to say that I'm now a graduate student studying interior architecture with a focus on accessible design to make more neuro-inclusive spaces for all people, including those with invisible and physical disabilities. With that in mind, I'm now utilized at FIU. At my university, I'm able to utilize what things need to be done in order to help those in need. I've been doing numerous amounts of reconnaissance, utilizing the academia at my university, and also finding wayfinding of how we can better make more sensory-friendly spaces from the workplace to the office to even the environmental or even sociological environments that we may utilize every day. from work to school to the hospital to even dining in residential areas and hospitality environments. By utilizing this, I am able to create more inclusive spaces for everyone to thrive, not just people with disabilities, but for everyone to be able to encourage each other and really thrive in the space. With that in mind, I do not do this alone. I utilize a vast network of interpersonal connections to be able to surpass my expectations and goals with the help of the Neurodiversity Alliance, Dr. Carrie Margot's KFM Making a Difference, and Miss Tamika Morales and her and the Autism Hero Project. These organizations are just a few of what really truly allows me to be able to communicate with those on the spectrum, those with disabilities, and those that truly want to make a difference. And by having all these like-minded people within my radar, I'm able to really truly make a difference and actually do change rather than just talk about it. And with that in mind, I'm so grateful to have these organizations with me to be able to create more inclusive design, both interior design, architecture, or even just the layout of said space. To summarize this, I would also like to share that I utilize that autism itself is a diagnosis and it's a lifelong diagnosis. With that in mind, it is something that you have forever until your very last breath. While it did take me personally a lot of time to accept that I was autistic, over time I did utilize it that it's not a negative term, but just another part of you. Autism is, like Carrie Margot says, autism itself does not define you. With that in mind, I'm so proud to say that I'm really truly making a difference within my community. And I do hope that my story does not discourage those that are watching this and to be able to understand that with autism and having your diagnosis, it's not a linear pathway. There are some good days and there's some bad days. And there will be hurdles along the way. But my advice is personally, keep your head up and work hard and truly understand what brings you joy in this world. And understand that just because you might have a niche interest in something, that does not mean that it's a bad thing or it's a weird thing. Personally, I would say utilize it to the best of your ability and try to find a purpose for it. And with that in mind, I would like to say thank you all so much for allowing me to present. With this in mind, here's attached is my contact information from my LinkedIn is a QR code, and as well as my email and personal number for business purposes, or if you'd like to just connect as like-minded people. I'm so grateful to be able to be here, and I do appreciate everything and everyone that's been able to take the time to better understand my story and to understand that with neurodiversity, there's more to it than just a diagnosis.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I am Morgan with Bevell's Advocate, and today we're going to talk about something both parents and educators live through every year, the IEP table. This session is called the IEP table, what every parent and educator wishes the other knew. It's a candid look at both sides of that table, not to assign blame, but to build a shared language. We'll cover where communication breaks down, how a good advocate can bridge that gap instead of widening it, and 2 practical tools you can use at your very next meeting. Let's get started. Let's start with a simple truth. Everyone who sits at an IEP table wants the same outcome, the best possible plan for that child. Nobody walks in trying to make things harder, but what each person can see from their seat is very different. Think about the family side for a moment. A parent sees their child as a whole person, not a data point on a progress report. They're often hearing decisions explained in language they've never encountered before. FAPE, LRE, BIP. They may not know they have enforceable legal rights until something has already gone wrong. And for many families, this meeting feels like their one shot to be heard before the next review cycle rolls around months later. Now flip to the educator side. That same conversation you're having with the one family, the educator may be having across dozens of students that same week. They're balancing legal compliance with real staffing and time limits they didn't set. There's often more than they're thinking than they're able to say out loud in the room, and they need to plan to actually work in a classroom with 25 other students in it too. Neither view is wrong, they're just different vantage points on the same table. So here's what we're going to cover today, framed around 3 objectives. First, we'll identify the most common communication breakdowns between families and educators, the barriers and constraints on both sides that often go unspoken. Secondly, we'll talk about how family-centered advocacy, done well, actually supports the educator-family relationship instead of undermining it. A good advocate is a bridge, not a battering ram. And third, you'll walk away with at least 2 practical tools you can use at your very next IEP meeting, one for families, one for educators, to make these conversations more productive from the start. Think of these 3 as the roadmap for the rest of our time together. Let's start with part 1, communication breakdowns. We're going to look at where families and educators lose each other in this process. First, what families often can't see, then what educators are quietly navigating, and finally, the exact moment in a meeting where these 2 realities collide. Let's start with the family side. There are 3 barriers that show up again and again. The first is what I call a wall of acronyms: FAPE, LRE, BIP, IEP, IDEA. This is jargon that took professionals years of training to learn, and it's often handed to a family in the span of a single hour-long meeting. No wonder people leave confused. The second barrier is invisible timelines. There are procedural deadlines running in the background of every case, evaluation windows, response periods, records requests, and they tick along whether or not a family even knows to watch for them. By the time a parent realizes a deadline mattered, it's often already passed. And the third is unknown rights. Most parents don't know they have enforceable legal rights under IDEA and Section 504 until something has already gone wrong and they're scrambling to catch up. Here's the thing. These 3 compound each together. Here's the thing. These 3 compound each other. You can't exercise a right you don't know you have, and you can't track a timeline you don't know is running. That's not a knowledge gap families created, it's a systems gap. Now let's flip to the other side of the table because educators are navigating their own set of invisible constraints. First, compliance under pressure. Every single IEP has to satisfy legal documentation standards, often for 20 plus students on a caseload, on top of a full teaching or case management workload. That paperwork isn't optional and it's not quick. Second, caseloads beyond capacity. Case managers frequently carry caseloads well above what's actually recommended, which leaves genuinely limited minutes for any one family's questions, not because they don't care, but because the math doesn't work. And third, resources that don't stretch. Staffing levels, funding, and specialist availability are decided at the district level long before anyone sits down at that table. The educator across from you often doesn't control the resources they're being asked to deploy. I want to be very clear about what we're naming this. It's not an excuse for poor practice. It's context that families help aim their advocacy at the system, not the person sitting across from them. This next slide is usually the one that gets an aha reaction, so let's slow down here. Same meeting, same sentence, 2 very different translations happening in 2 different heads. The first pair, the family hears, that's not something we can offer. What the educator often means is that exceeds what our current staffing allows. Let's find another path. One sounds like a wall. The other is actually an invitation to problem solve. The second pair, the family hears, we don't have data on that yet. What the educator oftentimes means is that we want to base this decision on evidence, not on a guess. That's not a brush off. That's actually really good practice, just poorly translated in the moment. And third, the family hears, let's revisit that next meeting. What the educator means is this means more people at the table needs to be present before we can decide. Again, not a delay tactic, but rather a recognition that the right people aren't all in the room yet. This is exactly where an advocate, or frankly, just a well-prepared facilitator on either side, adds the most value. Not by taking sides, but by translating in real time so both people are responding to what was actually meant, not what was necessarily just heard. That brings us to part 2, a bridge, not a battering ram. Now that we've named where things break down, let's talk about how family-centered advocacy done the right way actually strengthens the relationship between families and educators instead of straining it further. Let's be direct about something. An advocate it should not be a hired gun. That's not our role at Bevell's Advocate, and honestly, it shouldn't be anyone's role in this process. Bevell's Advocate exists to translate, organize, and clarify, with helping families show up prepared, not to position schools as the opponents. And in practice, that looks like these 4 things. 1, we translate procedural language and legal rights into plain terms so families walk in understanding what's actually being discussed. 2, we help families organize their concerns into clear, actionable requests instead of a long list of frustrations they bring. They bring their 3 specific asks. 3, we keep communication in writing and on a fair, predictable timeline so nothing gets lost or forgotten. And 4, this one matters the most, we name systemic gaps in the district. We never blame individual staff for problems that are actually more about funding, staffing, or policy. When advocacy works this way, it doesn't create more friction at the table. It actually reduces it because the family's concerns are already organized before the meeting even starts. Now let's get practical about language, because how something is said often matters almost just as much about what's said. So here are 3 common flashpoints that we've reframed. Instead of saying, "You're not doing enough for my child," here's what I'm seeing at home, and can we look at the data together? Same underlying concern, but one invites a fight and the other invites collaboration. Instead of, "The parents just don't understand the process," try, "Let's walk through the timeline together so everyone's working from the same page." This assumes good faith instead of assuming a deficit. And instead of, "If this doesn't happen, we'll be filing a complaint," try, "I want to resolve this here. What would it take to get there?" That doesn't mean you give up your rights or your options. It just means you lead with resolution instead of leading with escalation, and you keep escalation in your back pocket in case you truly need it. I'd encourage you, when we're done today, to think of your own version of, and instead of this, and try this swap for your real meeting you've been a part of. These reframes aren't about being passive, they're about being precise. Let's move into part 3, practical tools for the table. This is the most actionable part of our time together. 2 tools, one for each side of the table that you can use starting at the very next meeting that you're in. And I'd suggest getting a pen ready to write this down. So the first tool, a set of questions families can bring to the table to communicate their needs clearly and constructively. What data are we using to make this decision, and can I see it? This keeps decisions grounded in evidence, not assumption. What would this goal look like if my child met it? Can you show me an example? This makes an abstract goal more concrete. What happens if this service isn't being providing enough progress by the next review? This builds in that accountability more from the start. What is the timeline for this decision, and when will I hear back in writing? This closes that loop of those invisible timelines that we talked about earlier. It just puts things more in a paper trail. Who else should be at this table, and how do I request they attend? This makes sure that you're getting all the right people that are needed to be in there in the room. And finally, what are my options if we don't agree today? This isn't combative. It's just good preparation to know your rights, especially if you don't have an advocate or someone else with you to help with that. I'd suggest picking 2 or 3 of these, writing them on an index card, and bringing them to your next meeting just to help you feel more prepared. And now here's the second tool for educators: 4 ways to proactively invite family engagement before adversarial dynamics even have a chance to develop. First, send a short pre-meeting note asking what the family most wants to cover. This alone prevents a lot of surprises in the room. Second, offer a plain language summary of proposed goals before the meeting starts. Give families a head start on understanding instead of processing everything live, because that can be overwhelming. Third, build in a standing check-in question. What are we missing from your view at home? This one habit signals the family's perspective is actively wanted, not just tolerated. And fourth, name the timeline and next steps out loud before the meeting ends. Don't leave the people wondering, what happens next. None of these are required. They don't require new paperwork or any new systems. They're very low lift, high trust habits that can start at your very next meeting, and they go a long way towards preventing the exact breakdowns that we talked about earlier. This slide is designed to be the one people screenshot so you can walk away with kind of the key takeaways quickly. So for families, bring 2 to 3 written questions in advance, ask for data before agreeing to a decision, request next steps and dates in writing, and name the outcome you want, not just the problem you're facing. For educators, send a plain language preview before the meeting, name constraints honestly without over-explaining or over-apologizing, ask the family what they're seeing at home, and close every meeting with clear next steps and a date. Notice that these two lists mirror each other. That's intentional. When both sides come prepared with the same habits, the table starts to feel a lot less like two opposing sides and a lot more like one team working the same problem, which is what an IEP team is intended to be. So let's bring this together with our 3 takeaways. 1, most breakdowns come from invisible barriers and constraints, not bad intentions. Families can't see the caseloads and compliance pressure educators are managing, and educators don't always know what a family doesn't understand yet. Naming that gap out loud does most of the work. 2, a good advocate is a bridge that clarifies the conversation, not a wall that hardens it. If advocacy is making a relationship worse instead of better, something in the approach needs to change. And 3, small practical habits on both sides of the table prevent most conflicts before they even start. You don't need a dramatic overhaul. You need a few written questions, a plain language preview, and a habit of naming next steps out loud. The goal was never winning at this table. It's building one that actually both sides can trust each other. So let's build a better table together. Thank you for showing up today for the kids on both sides of this conversation, because that's really what it's about. If you want to keep this conversation going, Bevell's Advocate is easy to reach. Our email address is info@bevelsadvocate.com. You can call or text 801-609-8321 or find us at www.bevelsadvocate.com. We've got special education advocacy. We have monthly community meetups and an advocate training program that we're starting. So if you're a family looking for support or an educator looking for a partner, we'd love to hear from you.